是跟着他干嘛呀？
关灯。
Firstly, I wanted to ask is what's so interesting about the film is the way of course, it shifts. And in this film, lines between the stalker and the stock keep shifting. And it just keeps like unrolling and shifting itself and playing out all over fragmented perspectives. I wanted to know because you have been writing and rewriting the film over 10 years. How did you envisage the various mediations, the various layers that the self, the reality, life, relationships move through?
Um, I guess, of course, firstly, I wanted to make a film about watching people, right?
Yeah.
And I cannot get away from the idea of that, every time you watch someone, it's from a certain perspective. There is never sort of a God's eye view, right? That one can see everything. And I'm a firm believer that, every certain fact, taken from the standpoint of where you see it and who you are watching it, colors the event quite differently, right? So I think there it is about perspectives. Is the film really about perspectives? And I wanted to play with the idea of this multi-perspective, right? But at the same time, I don't need to look too far to think about this idea because it's really in our everyday lives now. We look at social media, we look at, there's like there's so much perspectives given to us. We can't differentiate truth from lies. We can't differentiate, the the multitude of perspectives that are given to us right now. And for me, I even think that my audience is quite used to flipping around from perspectives these days. Sometimes the audience these days they're so used to having different forms of mediums thrown at them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Staying put in one medium seems to be difficult these days for
It's
many.
really difficult. Yeah, we are so overstimulated all the time. So yeah, it's become almost natural. But also there's this kind of osmosis, a kind of the- a reflection between the two men, the younger and the older man, a kind of mirroring. Was that always like a key trigger in the narrative when you were starting out?
No, absolutely. Um, I think structurally, when I was writing this film, I had always imagined these two blocks of flats as they are looking at each
Yeah.
other, as a certain kind of how should I call it? Like a metaphysical mirror, you know,
Mhm.
kind of reflecting on each other. Of course, slowly it reveals itself to be the case. Maybe not right from the start, and there's a slow realization about it. Yeah, and so this osmosis, it's at the same time a question of like, were they all the time already the same person, or is this something like or is a transformation happening? And for me, it's very curious because it's also something I like to explore. That if you watch someone intently, and you spend a lot of time watching the person, I honestly believe that there is a certain kind of transformation that happens because watching is not
Mm.
it's not a passive
It's
act.
a passive thing. Huh.
Yeah, so many times I'm watching people just on the streets, total strangers, and I see that they're playing with their fingers or tapping their fingers, and I realize I'm doing the same thing, like unconsciously, right? It's,
Yeah.
it's, it's a strange thing. Like we as human beings, we are mimicking animals. I mean, we are animals who mimic, right? To put it this way, we take on the forms of the other, the other that we see. And so I think there's a lot of self-discovery through the other.
Yeah.
I don't believe in a process of self-discovery on pure introspection. You know, I
Yeah,
always
yeah, yeah.
I'm a firm believer in the idea of a self-discovery through the other, and I think a lot of this film, as you say, there's an osmosis between them, and I take that to be the case, yeah, of a transformation.
Yeah, because we are not discrete entities. We're always absorbing, we're always reflecting of the other. And this is what the film really like incredibly captures very well. But I do want to talk about the two apartments, which I found very like fascinating because how did you pull that off? Like it was almost the same height and yeah. So tell me a little bit about sourcing and possibly the permission for that would have been a little difficult.
That is actually the most difficult part of the film, rightfully
Okay.
pointed out, because looking at the film, it seems to be like easy, like it seems to be
Easy.
like
Yeah.
like just two residential units looking at each other. But that's a disguise, right? It's actually way more difficult than it seems, because as you pointed out, these two units have to be at the exact same height, so that
Mhm.
we have the right viewing angles into each other. You can imagine if it's just a little bit higher or lower, we would not be able to see
Yeah.
the apartment very well, right? The apartment across. And these are both lived-in apartments. These are all actual apartments used
Yeah.
by families, right? It was not a set that we create, and so two family. We needed to find firstly two appropriate sized, appropriate class and sized apartments, and that both families have to be willingly agreeing to vacate their apartment for 2 weeks at the same time.
The same time. At the same time.
At the same time, because if one of them disagrees, the other one, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, there's
The two have
a
to have, yeah, have to be agreeing at the same time. And so I just have to say that I thankfully have an amazing team. My locations and logistics team, who basically went to knock on half of the doors of Singapore, just to get this. I remember quite clearly that I think it was almost a month before we started shooting. The pairing that we found, one of them dropped out. So
Oh
it was a
no.
disaster. Yeah, it was a total disaster. We were scrambling. We were really scrambling. Because and if there are no apartments, there's no film, right? So we were scrambling, and but thankfully again we managed to find a pairing like even better than the one that we found before. That they agreed to let us use the space, and that's why we have the film now. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. But talk to me a little bit about having producers like Akanga Film Asia who really stick by you and who really prop you up at the right time because yeah, it's almost like a second rebirth of this film. Talk to me a little bit about that, having producers like them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Fran Borgia of Akanga, yeah, and later on, the other producer I work with a lot, Dan Cole. I mean, these
Hmm.
people have been behind me right from the start. I have to say. I mean, we're looking at Stranger Eyes, and it's something that we were working on for the last 4 to 6 years, depending on how you want to count the starting point. Um, all through the pandemic, and that
And they
was
had
really
worked. They had
difficult
worked.
times.
They had worked with you on Land Imagined as well. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I was also gonna
Ah.
say. Like, yeah, these are, but at the same time, these are producers who have worked with me from Alan Imagine, which was again another, 6 to 8 years, even before Stranger Eyes. And they have been behind me all through this time. They have stuck by me and they've believed in me, and that's really really important, because filmmaking for a director can be a very lonely journey. It's a long time that we take to realize the film, whether is it to get funding for development, yeah, And it was so important that they stuck by me. Not only that, they believed in my vision, right? Fran has been doing that with all his films, I believe, and that's why he has become a really important figure in Southeast Asia as a producer, really bringing a lot of Southeast Asian cinema to the rest of the world, through co-productions and like basically through his love of cinema, his passion for cinema. He is a truly passionate cinema lover over and beyond a producer, and that I really respect him for. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember Akanga has also like done incredible work on with a lot of Indian filmmakers of late. So yeah, I'm pretty impressed. But as incredible as Lee Kang Sheng is, which we'll get to, I was also struck by Wu Jian Ho. How do you pronounce his name?
Wu Jianhe, yes.
Wu Jian Ho. Yeah, who has a pretty complicated role because he doesn't really express so much, but he is containing a lot. So I want to know, like, because you say that you give a lot of freedom to your actors, how do you work with your actors through this maze of hidden glances? And yeah, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think you pointed out also exactly that his role is really difficult because there is so
Mm.
much on his mind. There's so much like sort of kept within him, but at the same time, I didn't write so much lines for him to express this. As an
Yes,
actor,
exactly.
this is really difficult. As an actor, it's a lot easier if you can express this through lines. But I think I was trying to push him with this challenge, which he really took it on with beautifully. Um, he's playing a young guy, a young character, and how do you? I mean, we've seen kind of cynical, silent, older kind of characters, you know, like that has a burden of history on them, but just as well, we have young people who are very, very troubled now, who is unable to express themselves, even more so in this new world, I would say,
Mm.
and yeah, I think Uzi and her just really did an amazing job trying to capture that element from the script and to translate it with his body, onto the film. Um, I mean, there was no, I there's no sort of magic bullet to how to direct this, but it's really about like tweaking it as we go. So maybe
Mm.
right from the start, you know, we had to it's the first time we're working with each other also, right? So I think it's a lot of us needing to get a sense of each other, to have that trust between each other, and then as we go, we I will tweak his performance, and I think he really got it by the time. I think by the second day we were shooting, he was really into the character. He was really immersed into it, and it's almost hard to get him out of it after a while, right? But yeah, he was there with the character. Mm.
Yeah. And there was also this one thing that your DP, Hideo also said that initially there was a bit of difficulty in because there's some differences between the way Taiwanese and Singaporean actors act. So I wanted to know what that was. Could you expand a bit on that?
Um, it's hard to say exactly how different it is, but I would say that
Mm.
they do come from different acting backgrounds. Whether is it our film and our TV, that's different from their film and their TV, But I think that's fun for me. I like to do this, like to bring actors from different acting backgrounds, sometimes from theater, sometimes from TV, and sometimes from film, right? Sort of bring them together to jam, you know.
Yeah.
I also think it keeps the actors on their toes a little because they're acting with people they're not so familiar with, or they're with not so familiar acting backgrounds. And I think this is really fun when we put it all together and have a jam with it. There is also an actor from Malaysia. Let's not forget Pete Teo, the guy who plays the police officer. So he's from Malaysia.
Oh, yeah.
Um, also an actor that I like a lot. Yeah, and they were all, again, they needed time to find their own groove with each other. And but by the second and third day, we were all really, really having a lot of fun with it. Yeah. Yeah. I would say, some people are better at being spontaneous, and some people are better at being interpreting to the script, and and that just makes the whole
Yeah.
mix
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. But how involved are you in the editing? Because in this, the editor who's worked on this is, of course, great. He's French, but did he did he know the language? Like, was he aware of the like? I wanted to ask you that how much does his awareness or lack of awareness of the language come in the way of approaching the glances, the kind of performances that he wanted? Yeah, were you
Mm.
involved in the editing from a very early stage, or yeah?
Um, I didn't want to get involved in the earlier stages of the editing because
Mm.
that's what I want. I wanted him to sort of bring his own element into it instead of me being a director imposing right at the start. And so yes, the editor really, really, worked his magic. And interestingly, I think it's nice that because this film is about gazes, it's about watching, it's the textual element is there, of course, to understand the story of the film. And we we gave him the subtitles so that he knew, of course, what the scenes were about. But at the same time, there was so much other kind of subtleties in the film that you really need to pick up, not through the text of the film. And I
Mm.
think, that's where I think he was, it kind of crosses boundaries, right? Like,
Automatically.
whether the in a way the language, it wasn't really about the language anymore at some point,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Mm.
And John Christophe, he is just again an amazing editor and collaborator. He had something, and then I came on board, and then I was like, okay, this is very interesting. I like some of it. Some of it for me didn't work so much, and again we jammed, and then we had iterations of it. But I enjoyed that. I wasn't working with people that was just out of my comfort zone. It
Yeah.
was it's the first time for me working with a French editor, and he brought something of his own into the film that for me was a true collaboration with him. Yeah.
Mm. Now the film has released in Singapore earlier this year, correct? It has.
Late last year or earlier this year? I mean,
Last.
it's this.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Actually,
But
earlier this
in
year. You're right. You're right. Earlier this year. Yeah.
earlier
Mm.
this year, huh? Now tell me a little bit about the reception, not just locally but internationally. What do you make of? Are there things that you're amused by, a little worried by when people talk about the stuff that this film is talking about, be privacy surveillance, projection of one's image, reflections? Talk to me a little bit about what the discourse around the film has like, yeah, anything interesting that has really struck you when you find that what people are talking about the film.
Mm. It's interesting. It's interesting because I think different people from different contexts have a very, very different relationship with surveillance, right?
Hmm.
Um, we know in Asia, surveillance is very heavy. I think that's a fact. From
Yeah.
Singapore, where I come from, it is a very heavily surveillance city, right? But also largely in Asia, right? Um, Meanwhile, maybe in Europe, they are very worried about surveillance, but at the same time, but they're not, how to put it, they're not in that same way that we already sort of take surveillance as part of our natural environment. And
Yeah.
so there is still that relationship that is very different for them. Um, I have shown this film in places that have told me um, that it really strikes fear onto them about this idea of surveillance, of being constantly watched. But at the same time, I've also shown this film to an audience that told me you weren't being critical enough about
Mm.
surveillance, right?
Mm.
Um, yeah, and that's very interesting. You know, that for me that's very interesting. I mean, I maybe I didn't set out to make a film that was purely demonizing surveillance. I feel like as it is now in our in the state of where we live in. I mean, I don't like to be constantly watched by surveillance myself, but at the same time, I can totally imagine a couple who lost their baby praying
Yeah.
that the surveillance camera had caught something, right? I mean, we live in a much more complicated time than, a black and white kind of no surveillance is going to encroach in our privacy. It's the demon, you know. Um,
Mm.
at the same time, that we also have a social contract now with a lot of big corporates who are surveillancing us through our marketing materials, right? By the promise of more precise advertising, isn't it? So this idea of surveillance is, for me, it's a lot more complicated than what it first seems, right? And I think a different audience with that different relationship with surveillance sees the film quite
Yes.
differently. Yeah, yeah.
Respond differently. I want to like finally take a couple of recommendations. Any filmmakers working in Singapore that you feel we should look out for?
Oh no, absolutely, yes.
Right.
Daniel Hui, um, yeah, who also was the editor on Alain Imagine, a good friend and collaborator of mine. He has been making films together, sort of in the same time as I was, and he has made some amazing films. So do look out for Daniel Hui's films. Um, Raja Gopal, K. Raja Gopal, who made a Yellow Bird. Um, Actually, yeah, there's really so many names, but
Mm.
yeah, I work with a film collective of filmmakers called the 13 Little Pictures, to which I will also want to do a shout out to them. They have been making very strong independent films for a long time. Very, very interesting films. Yeah.
Yeah. And last question, what's next for you? Is there anything that you're working on?
Nothing concrete yet. Yeah, I'm still thinking about this, but yeah. Mm.
Okay, okay. Thanks a lot, Yo. Wonderful to speak to you, and I can't wait to see what you do next. And good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.